John Adams was born into the hard-working soil of New England on October 30th, 1735. In the small farming town of Braintree, Massachusetts, a place of meeting houses, schoolrooms, and the stubborn rhythms of colonial life. From the beginning, his life was shaped by the Puritan commitment to learning, industry, and moral seriousness. His father, a farmer and shoemaker, and his mother, a member of a respected local family, pushed the boy towards study. Young John proved to be intellectually earnest and fiercely disciplined. He attended Harvard College, where he read law, theology, and the classics, preparing himself not for sermons or ease, but for argument, advocacy, and public duty. It was during these years that he developed a precise, sometimes severe mind, one that measured ideas as tools to be tested in the marketplace of public affairs. He married Abigail Smith in 1764, beginning a partnership that would be among the most powerful and sustained intellectual marriages in American history. Abigail was not simply a devoted spouse. She was a correspondent, advisor, and conscience, who kept John anchored to personal warmth even as he wrestled with public turbulence. Their letters over decades would become a window into the moral and political life of the young republic. Adams's career as a lawyer brought him face to face with the most urgent questions of justice in a tense colonial society. In 1770, when British soldiers fired on a Boston crowd in what would be remembered as the Boston Massacre, Adams made a decision that revealed the core of his character. He agreed to defend the accused soldiers. In doing so, he risked his popularity and reputation, because the passions of the city ran high. Yet Adams believed in the rule of law and the right to a fair trial. He defended the soldiers with eloquence and integrity, and several were acquitted. That act became an early demonstration of his commitment to principle over expediency. As colonial grievances multiplied, taxation without representation, writs of assistance, and a growing sense that the imperial compact had been breached, Adams emerged as an able, clear-thinking advocate for American rights. He was chosen as a delegate to the Continental Congress, where his voice was measured, Republican in temper, and persuasive in counsel. He was not a showman. He was a builder of constitutional habits. He argued for frank discussion, for the creation of institutions that would check power, and for a sober vision of independence that took into account both principle and prudence. When the question of separation from Britain could no longer be postponed, Adams played an essential role in the movement that brought the colonies to declare themselves a new nation. He served on committees and pushed for a compact among the states that would secure liberty and order together. Though he was not the principal drafter of the Declaration of Independence, his presence, his arguments, and his drafting skill contributed to the atmosphere in which that text was born. During the Revolutionary War, he was a tireless public servant and, later, a diplomat. He traveled to Europe to secure allies and loans, first to France and then to the court of the Netherlands, where his diplomacy proved vital to the survival of the young republic. He helped persuade European creditors and governments that the United States was not a passing rebellion but a new entity with serious prospects. Adams's work in Europe culminated in his participation in negotiating the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the agreement that recognized American independence and reopened the world to American commerce. Returning home, he turned his attention to the building of civic institutions. He took seriously the hard and often overlooked work of creating laws, charters, and constitutions capable of sustaining republican government. In Massachusetts, he drafted a constitution, one of the first written state constitutions that balanced popular rights with stable structures of governance. And his political writings articulated a belief in mixed government, separation of powers, and the necessity of virtue alongside liberty. The Confederation period showed Adams that the loose league the states had forged needed strengthening. He argued, with growing force, that a republic required a stable central authority to manage debt, provide for defense, and regulate commerce. At the Constitutional Convention, he pushed for measures that would protect the Union from factionalism and paralysis, even when his proposals met resistance from those who feared too much centralization. When George Washington became the first president in 1789, he selected John Adams as his vice president, a role Adams accepted with characteristic seriousness. Vice presidency did not offer the power Adams preferred, but he carried out the office with discipline and an eye toward the duties of governance. The 1796 presidential election brought Adams the presidency itself. He assumed the office in a fraught international context. The French Revolution had plunged Europe into turmoil, and the United States stood vulnerable between warring powers. Adams had a mind for principle, but also a deep sense of responsibility to preserve peace and the constitutional order. His presidency confronted immediate crises. Diplomatic friction with revolutionary France led to the infamous XYZ affair, in which French agents demanded bribes for negotiation. The public, outraged, called for war. Adams faced a test of character. He could have seized the moment to enter into full-scale conflict, but instead he held fast to the precarious craft of diplomacy. He strengthened the navy and prepared defenses, but he also sought a path to peace. In 1800, he sent a mission that eventually restored relations and avoided a wider war, an act that satisfied prudence, though it cost him politically among those who wanted vengeance. Domestically, Adams governed in an era of partisan division that he had always warned against. The Federalist Party, with its emphasis on order and a strong national government, stood opposed to the Democratic Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson, who favored agrarianism and states' rights. These disagreements were not merely about policies. They were about the character of the republic itself. In the heat of partisanship, Congress enacted the Alien and Sedition Acts measures. Adams signed that restricted speech and gave the government expanded power to expel non-citizens. Adams's decision to approve these acts remains controversial. He believed the measures were temporarily necessary in a time of crisis and foreign threat. Critics asserted they violated the liberties the revolution had fought to secure. The history of those laws remains a complicated moral ledger in Adams's record. Adams's judicial appointments, however, left a long constitutional imprint. In the closing days of his administration, he signed commissions under the Judiciary Act that established new federal judgeships, an attempt to shape the courts before a rival party took power. One of his appointments, John Marshall, would go on as Chief Justice to architect a constitutional order that balanced federal power and set principles of judicial review that still guide the United States. The election of 1800, bitter, divisive, and historic, saw Adams defeated by Thomas Jefferson. Rather than clinging to power or fomenting unrest, Adams accepted the verdict. His peaceful transfer of authority was a test and a triumph for the American experiment, demonstrating that the young republic could change its leaders without bloodshed. In retirement at his farm in Quincy, Adams entered a different, but no less significant phase of public life. He cultivated his land, raised his family, and turned again to letters. It was in retirement that a remarkable friendship was rekindled. Adams and Thomas Jefferson, political rivals throughout their public careers, resumed a long correspondence that would extend for years. Their letters covered politics, philosophy, and the state of the nation, and they are among the most illuminating documents of the founding era. John and Abigail's exchange of letters, too, continued. Abigail's counsel remained a moral compass, and their shared reflections on virtue, governance, and family formed a living philosophy. When he watched his eldest son, John Quincy Adams, rise through public office to become president in 1825, The aging Adams saw in his progeny the continuation of public service across generations. His final days were touched by a poetic coincidence. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, two of the Republic's great architects died within hours of one another. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Adams's last written words have been tenderly reported. As Thomas Jefferson survives, though history recorded that Jefferson had already passed, the poignancy of their deaths on the same day became a symbol of the founding generation's deep bonds, their quarrels, and their shared labors to create a nation. John Adams's legacy resists easy summation because it is a compound of stern principle, careful institution building, and human fallibility. He was not a man of theatrical charisma, but he was a man of steady intellect and moral seriousness who believed the health of a republic depended on civic virtue, clear law, and honest government. He wrote fiercely against corruption, argued for balanced constitutional structures, and shaped the practical routines of governance that allowed the United States to survive its perilous infancy. His life offers lessons about the cost of leadership and the fragility of liberty. He knew that the survival of a free people required more than rhetoric. It required the deliberate construction of practices and institutions that could channel ambition into public good. He knew too that the hazards of faction, foreign entanglement, and unrestrained passion could undo nations as surely as armies could. Yet he also knew that law without principle or power, without restraint, would fail a free people. Adams's story is the story of a citizen statesman who trusted reason, tempered it with prudence, and accepted the burdens of responsibility, whether in courtrooms, councils, or the quiet rooms where he and Abigail argued and dreamed. If the United States succeeded in becoming a government of laws and not of men, Adams was among those who made that achievement possible. His writings, his institutional acts, and his lifelong insistence that liberty be joined to order secure him a place among the architects of the American experiment. In narrative and in memory, he remains a reminder that the work of founding a nation is not the work of heroics alone, but of patient discipline, sacrifice, and constitutional craftsmanship.